It is the voice of Indiana County. It's WCCS 101.1 FM, AM 1160, WCCSradio.com. Mr. Bob Pollock is with us this morning. Bob Pollock from the Extension Service here in Indiana. Conversation brought to you by Marcus & Mack, voted Best Personal Injury Law Firm. Best of Indiana County contest. Marcus & Mack, a law firm representing injured people. You can give us a call at 479-1160 or 349-WCCS if you have a question for Bob, of course, for many people. That question is going to be, what does it mean when we're on a moderate drought watch? Is my lawn ever going to recover? Is my garden ever going to grow? And that probably is a pretty good place to start. With as dry as it's been, with the grass looking like it's the middle of August rather than the beginning of June, we're wondering, can they recover if we should start to get rain all of a sudden?
Hopefully they will. The grass is pretty resilient. That if we start to get a few showers coming in, it's able to go dormant. It won't look that great, but it will. Once we get a little moisture, it'll typically come back. Now there are exceptions to that. There are variations in our soil types and what we have to work with there as far as the soil goes and the depth of that soil. Mm-hmm. Of course, some soils are more shaly soils, or there might only be a small cover of topsoil, and then we get into rock. So those sites tend to be more susceptible to the drought. Yeah. Just because the volume of soil isn't there, the root system is not as extensive. And so those places can dry up, and there might be situations where those don't come back. Mm-hmm. But in most cases, the grass will, go into that survival mode and come back when it's ready to and conditions are right.
Grass is pretty smart. Let's take a call here this morning. Good morning.
Hi, this is the Iris guy calling back.
We weren't sure whether you were going to call back or not. We've been anxiously waiting.
The really scary part was it sounded at first like you said, this is the IRS guy calling back.
Last week I called about my iris stems not supporting my flowers, and then afterwards I realized that I have bunches of iris with no blooms. Now, is that typical, or is there some soil amendment I can provide that will help those vigorous plants bloom?
A couple reasons that could be happening, and one is overcrowding. So if they get too dense, and that clump gets too thick, then that can kind of stress the plants. They're not able to. They won't flower as well. They're trying to just survive. So that can be one reason why there can be and the plant may still look pretty healthy, but it's just not getting into flowering mode. The other thing is soil that's too fertile, where they're growing too vigorously, and they just put all their energy into growing a plant at the expense of, flowering.
Right.
Now, another thing that can cause that is stress. Now, that stress would have had to have happened last growing season. Because all that, the flower buds and everything would have been set up by fall. So if those plants were, if they were stressed going into fall, then that can affect the plant's ability to flower in the spring. Now, and, add to that stress from cold temps. So you can have flower buds damaged. So there were some forsythia this spring. There were some that bloomed okay, and there were others that were spotty. And that goes back to probably that really cold temperature stretch we had there Christmas week that could have killed or damaged those buds because they're already there. and then they're just waiting for spring to come to do their thing. So that, although iris they're a pretty tough plant, but it may go back to just over density, or vigor, where we're so vigorous that we're just growing plants, and that usually comes from soil that's too fertile, meaning we've got a lot of fertility there. There's a lot of nutrients in there, as well as nitrogen, and then the plants are able to, they just grow, but they will do that at the expense of setting flower buds and then flowering.
Well, I think I need to look at the too close together.
Yeah.
The population. So.
And that happens with many bulbs and many perennials over time. Even the grasses, we've talked before about grasses, but they'll, all those plants can become too dense, overpopulated in a sense that we need to lift them, divide them, and spread them out so that they can do what we want them to do.
Plants have different goals than we have in life.
They do.
All right, very good. Anything else?
Hey, no, thanks a lot, guys. Have a great day.
You're welcome. Thanks for calling. We'll wait for your IRS man to call again.
If he's coming from the IRS, we don't want to hear him. All right. So that's a good question and a good solution. I bet there are a lot of people that notice things about, especially bulb plants.
And that gets away from you over time. You plant things and they're in a space, and eventually, and not all plants do that though. Not all plants are vigorous. Some have they're more of a clump plant, and they will not expand as quick.
Bring rhubarb into this conversation. Is rhubarb
so
one
that
suffers from
it'll spread. Over time, you may need to lift that, divide it out, because you can get more plants there than you want.
10 years ago, we had really good rhubarb plants, and now we barely get anything. It barely grows at all.
Yeah. So, if it's barely growing, usually we run
time to move on.
Yeah, time to move on, or plant a new planting, or lift the ones that are there that are still good, and maybe the soil needs, maybe we need to add some more compost or organic matter in there, or composted manure. Lift those plants. Now we usually want to do those things in the dormant season, when the foliage has died back and we have the least amount of stress on those plants at that period of time. We don't want to do it now.
I don't know. This is pretty dormant right now.
Yeah. And the plants, you're right. The plants are in survival mode, unless you're watering them, and then they're hanging in there. They still can get stressed, even though sometimes when we're watering, and we briefly mentioned that last week about we put some water around that plant. We get on that half a gallon or so of water that is representative of an inch, but all that volume of soil that's out beyond where that plant is and its root system is, that remains dry, if we're not overhead irrigating and watering the whole surface of the soil.
Just a couple of moments left, but I wanted to ask about the effect of rainfall on trees and on leaves. Are we going to see an early leaf fall, not as vigorous a leaf cover?
It's entirely possible. We have a lot of growing season left. It's early, but depending,
should it continue the way that it is now?
Right. Yeah. How stressed are those plants now? And they can, those roots will reach down, and some plants have compromised root systems. That last little storm that went through did some damage here and there. There were some trees uprooted. Obviously, those, to have that happen, there probably was some damage to the root system already, that it wasn't as strong as it should have been and anchored in the ground, that allowed that to happen, because the trees beside it are still standing. So that factors into that, the overall health of the plant itself, of the root system. How deep do its roots grow? You know, the soil, how much volume of soil does it have to function in? So those plants that are kind of out in the open and have more space and more room to grow a bigger root system are probably going to weather through this better than a plant that's, you know, a street tree, for example, that has a confined space to grow in.
The
and
one that's
especially
growing between the cracks on the sidewalk.
Yeah, or on top of that boulder in the woods, you know,
Yeah.
along the side of the bank. You know. How's that thing still alive?
All right. Well, there you go. Some issues here this morning on Indiana in the Morning. So you know, get out there and water where you can, but also be aware that, as Rob Nymick said the other day from Homer City Borough, you know, drinking water is better for humans than it is for plants. Both of you need it. You need it more. All right. Thank you, Robert.
You're welcome.
It's the voice of Indiana County, WCCS 101.1 FM, AM 1160, WCCSradio.com.